The echoing crack of a gunshot split the dawn air over Red River, Colorado, as Willow Sinclair stood at the window of the cramped bedroom she'd shared with her husband for 5 years. That sound so final, so terrible marked the third suicide in town this month. Drought and debt were claiming more lives than bullets in duels ever had in this corner of the frontier. And Willow knew better than most how desperation could hollow a person from the inside out. She pressed a hand to the glass, her wedding ring catching the first light of morning, wondering how long she could hold on before becoming the next tragedy folks whispered about at Sunday service. Turning from the window, Willow's gaze fell upon the empty side of the bed where Marcus should have been. 3 months gone now, taken by a fever that swept through Red River like wildfire. He'd left her with nothing but memories, a struggling ranch, and a mountain of debt that seemed to grow taller with each passing day. "Mama!" The soft voice from the doorway belonged to her 4-year-old daughter, Emma, her dark curls a mirror image of Marcus's. Behind her stood Thomas, 6 years old and already wearing a look too serious for a child. "Come here, my loves," Willow said, opening her arms. Her children rushed to her, and she enfolded them in an embrace that conveyed more security than she actually possessed. Over their heads, her eyes found the stack of overdue notices on the bedside table. The bank would be coming for the ranch soon. Willow Sinclair was running out of time, out of options, and dangerously low on hope. The spring of 1878 was proving to be the cruelest season Willow had ever weathered. After breakfast, a meager affair of cornmeal mush that barely filled their bellies, Willow sent the children to gather eggs from the few remaining hens while she calculated, yet again, how to stretch their dwindling supplies. The ledger before her told a grim story. Marcus had borrowed heavily from the bank to expand their cattle operation just before prices plummeted. Then the drought came, followed by the fever that took him. Now the bank wanted payment, and she had nothing to give them. A knock at the door startled her from her arithmetic of despair. Standing on her porch was Josiah Blackman, the bank manager, his round face pinched with what he likely believed was sympathy but looked more like contempt. "Mrs. Sinclair," he said, removing his hat. "I've come to discuss your situation." Willow straightened her spine. "I know what you're going to say, Mr. Blackman. I just need more time. I'm afraid time is something the bank can no longer extend. Your husband's loans are severely delinquent, and the interest continues to accumulate." He handed her another notice. "You have until the end of the month. After that, we'll be forced to take possession of the property." 2 weeks. "That's impossible, Mr. Blackman. I have children to consider." "Perhaps you should consider that before the deadline arrives." His eyes swept over the modest ranch house with its peeling paint and sagging porch. "There are arrangements that could be made for women in your position." The insinuation hung in the air between them, and Willow felt heat rise to her face. "I appreciate your concern for my welfare, Mr. Blackman, but I'll find a way to meet my obligations that doesn't include becoming anyone's kept woman." After Blackman left, Willow sank onto the porch steps, the notice crumpled in her fist. The sum was staggering over $2,000. She could sell everything they owned and still not cover half of it. "Mrs. Sinclair." A deep voice called from the yard. Willow looked up to see a man on horseback approaching. His clothes marked him as a cowboy, worn leather chaps, dusty boots, a faded blue shirt, and a hat pulled low over his eyes. As he drew closer, Willow recognized Luke Jameson, the foreman from the neighboring Double J Ranch. She'd seen him in town occasionally, a quiet man who kept to himself, but was known for his fair dealings and steady hand with horses. "Mr. Jameson," she acknowledged, quickly wiping away any trace of tears. "What brings you to Sinclair Ranch?" Luke dismounted, leading his chestnut gelding. He was tall, with broad shoulders that spoke of years of hard work. His face, tanned from the sun, was framed by sandy brown hair that curled slightly at the edges of his hat. I was riding fence and saw Blackman leaving. Figured it wasn't a social call. His blue eyes held a knowing look. "How bad is it?" Willow hesitated. Pride urged her to dismiss his concern, but practicality won out. "Bad enough. The bank's calling in Marcus's loans at the end of the month." Luke nodded slowly. "I heard about your situation. Was sorry to hear about Marcus. He was a good man." "Thank you," Willow said, the words automatic after months of condolences. "I came with a proposition, actually," Luke continued. "Mr. Jenkins, he owns the Double J. He's looking to expand his herd. He sent me to inquire if you might be willing to sell some of your cattle." Hope flickered briefly in Willow's chest. "I have 40 head left. Would he be interested in that many?" Luke shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "Mrs. Sinclair, I rode your range yesterday. You've got maybe 20 head left, and half of them won't survive another month in this drought." The truth hit Willow like a physical blow. 20, she whispered. "But Marcus said, your husband might not have wanted to worry you," Luke said gently. "And cattle can disappear in lots of ways out here: disease, predators, rustlers. The word hung in the air. Willow had suspected, but Marcus had always dismissed her concerns. "Mr. Jenkins is offering a fair price for what's left," Luke continued. "It won't cover everything, but it might buy you some time." Willow looked at the notice in her hand. Even a fair price for 20 head wouldn't make a dent in what she owed, but she nodded anyway. "I'd appreciate that. When would Mr. Jenkins want to make the purchase? I can bring the money tomorrow if that suits you." As Luke prepared to leave, Willow found herself asking, "Mr. Jameson, do you know of any work available in town? For a woman, I mean." Luke studied her for a moment, taking in her calloused hands and determined expression. "The hotel might need help with laundry. The saloon's always looking for servers. But Mrs. Sinclair, those jobs won't pay enough to save your ranch." "I'm aware of that, Mr. Jameson," Willow replied, a edge to her voice. "But they might feed my children while I figure out what comes next." Luke tipped his hat. "Of course, madam. I'll ask around town for you." As he rode away, Willow watched him go, wondering if selling the cattle would just be delaying the inevitable. The thought of losing the ranch, the home where her children were born, where she and Marcus had built their dreams, was almost unbearable. But what choice did she have? That evening, as Willow tucked her children into bed, Thomas asked the question she'd been dreading. "Are we going to have to leave, Mama?" Willow smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "I don't know yet, sweetheart. But no matter what happens, we'll be together. That's what matters most." "But Papa built this house for us," Thomas insisted, his young face serious. "He did," Willow agreed, her throat tight. "And no matter where we go, we'll take his love with us." Emma, already half asleep, murmured, "I miss Papa." "I know, darling. I miss him too." Willow kissed each child good night, then retreated to the porch, where the vast Colorado sky was a blanket of stars above her. She'd met Marcus Sinclair when she was just 17, newly arrived in Red River with her father, a shopkeeper looking for opportunities in the expanding Western territories. Marcus had been 23, handsome and full of plans for his ranch. They'd married within 6 months against her father's wishes. He'd wanted her to marry the doctor's son, a safer choice with a guaranteed future. But Willow had loved Marcus's dreams, his determination, his gentle heart. And for 5 years, they'd been happy, even when the work was hard and the rewards few. Now, at 24, she was a widow with 2 small children and no idea how to save the life they'd built. As promised, Luke returned the next day with payment for the cattle. The amount was fair, more than fair, Actually, but as Willow had suspected, it barely made a dent in what she owed the bank. "Mr. Jenkins also sent these," Luke said, handing over a sack of provisions: flour, coffee, sugar, bacon, and other necessities. "He thought you might need some supplies." Willow's pride warred with gratitude. "That's very kind, but I can't accept charity." "It's not charity, Mrs. Sinclair. It's payment for the water rights on the north section of your property. Mr. Jenkins has been wanting to negotiate access to that creek for some time." Willow knew there was no such negotiation, but she appreciated the attempt to preserve her dignity. "Then please thank Mr. Jenkins for his fair dealing." Luke shifted his weight, seeming hesitant. "There's something else. I spoke with Mrs. Henderson at the hotel. She needs someone to help with the laundry and cleaning 3 days a week, and Mr. Taylor at the general store needs help taking inventory. The pay's not much, but I'll take both," Willow said quickly. "When can I start?" "Tomorrow, if you're able. I can. I can watch your young ones while you're working if you'd like. I'm good with children." Luke's offer came awkwardly, as if he wasn't sure he should be making it. Willow studied him, surprised. "That's very kind, Mr. Jameson, but surely you have duties at the Double J." "I do, but Mr. Jenkins has given me some flexibility. Your children would be welcome to come to the ranch while you work. They'd be safe there, and there's plenty to keep them occupied." Willow didn't know what to make of this unexpected kindness from a man she barely knew. But she couldn't afford to refuse help, not now. "Thank you. That would be a great relief." Over the next week, Willow worked herself to exhaustion, rising before dawn to care for what remained of their livestock, then leaving the children with Luke while she scrubbed floors at the hotel and counted merchandise at the store. The work was hard but honest, and each coin she earned went into a jar hidden in the kitchen. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough to pay the debt by the end of the month. And Blackman had begun appearing at the ranch with increasing frequency, his offers of alternative arrangements becoming less veiled with each visit. One evening, as Willow returned from town, she found Luke sitting on her porch, carving a small wooden horse while Emma watched in fascination. Thomas was nearby, practicing with a small lasso Luke had apparently fashioned for him. "How was work?" Luke asked, setting down his knife as she approached. "Exhausting," Willow admitted, sinking onto the step beside him. "But Mrs. Henderson gave me leftover biscuits from the hotel dining room." She held up a cloth-wrapped bundle. "Mama, look what Mr. Luke made." Emma held up the wooden horse proudly. "It's beautiful," Willow said, genuinely impressed by the detailed carving. "You have quite a talent, Mr. Jameson." Luke shrugged, a hint of color appearing on his tan cheeks. "Just something to pass the time. My father taught me." As the children ran off to play with their new treasures, Willow turned to Luke. "I wanted to thank you for all you've done. The children look forward to their time with you. It's the only bright spot in their days lately." "They're good kids," Luke said, his voice warm. "Smart, too. Thomas has a way with horses that reminds me of myself at that age." Willow smiled, but it faded quickly. "Mr. Jameson, Luke, I need to ask you something. Anything. When the bank takes the ranch, and they will, do you think Mr. Jenkins might consider hiring me? I can cook, clean, do laundry. I'm stronger than I look, and I can learn whatever tasks he needs done." Luke was silent for a long moment, his eyes on the distant mountains. "Mrs. Sinclair, how much do you owe the bank?" Willow hesitated, then named the sum. Luke let out a low whistle. "That's a considerable amount. How did Marcus get in so deep?" "He had dreams," Willow said simply. "Big dreams for this place. He borrowed to buy more cattle to improve the land. Then the drought came and prices fell. He kept borrowing, thinking things would turn around." She twisted her wedding ring, a simple gold band that had belonged to Marcus's mother. He was trying to build something for our future, for the children. Luke nodded, understanding in his eyes. Dreams can cost more than we expect sometimes. Yes, Willow agreed. And now his dreams will cost us our home. The next day, Luke didn't come to watch the children as arranged. Instead, a young cowboy from the Double J arrived, explaining that Luke had urgent business in town but had asked him to help with the children. Disappointed but grateful, Willow went to work as usual. When she returned that evening, she found Luke's horse tied to her porch railing. Inside, she found him at her kitchen table, a stack of papers before him. "Luke, what's going on?" He stood as she entered, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Sinclair, Willow, I've been to see Mr. Blackman today." Willow's heart sank. Had Blackman moved up the deadline? Was she to be evicted sooner than expected? "I paid your debt, Mrs. Sinclair, all of it." The words hung in the air between them, impossible to process. "You? What?" "I paid the debt. The ranch is yours, free and clear." Luke slid the papers across the table toward her. "Here are the loan documents, marked paid in full." Willow stared at the papers, then at Luke, unable to comprehend what he was saying. "But how? Why? That's an enormous sum of money." Luke looked uncomfortable. "I had savings. Been working for the Double J for 10 years, living in the bunkhouse, not spending much. And—" he hesitated. "I knew your husband, Mrs. Sinclair, better than you might realize." Willow sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. "What do you mean?" Luke sat across from her, his hands clasped on the table. "About a year ago, Marcus approached me. He was in trouble, desperate for money. He wanted to sell me part of the ranch, but I didn't have enough cash on hand at the time. I tried to help him find other solutions, but he was proud. Too proud to admit to you how bad things had gotten." Willow felt tears burning behind her eyes. "He never said anything. Men like Marcus, they carry their burdens alone, thinking they're protecting their families. But sometimes that protection becomes its own kind of prison." Luke's voice was gentle. "After he died, I heard about the debt. I've been saving since then, intending to help somehow. Today just seemed like the right time." "But this is too much," Willow protested. "I can't possibly accept—" "You can," Luke interrupted, "and you will for your children's sake. Consider it an investment in their future, if that makes it easier to accept." "An investment?" Willow echoed, confused. "This ranch has good bones, Willow. With the right management and a little luck with the weather, it could be profitable again. I'm offering to help you rebuild as a partner if you'll have me." Willow stared at him, trying to make sense of this extraordinary offer. "Why would you do this? You barely know me." Luke was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I know enough. I know you're strong, determined, loyal. I know you love your children fiercely. I know you haven't given up despite everything." He paused. "And I know what it's like to lose everything and have to start again." Something in his tone made Willow realize there was much more to Luke Jameson than the quiet cowboy she'd thought him to be. "What happened to you?" she asked softly. "War," he said simply. "I lost my family, my home, everything in the war. Came west afterward, with nothing but the clothes on my back and nightmares that wouldn't quit. The Double J gave me a chance when I needed one. Now I'm giving you the same." Willow's heart ached for the pain she heard beneath his matter-of-fact words. "I don't know what to say except thank you. But I need to understand what kind of partnership you're proposing." "A business partnership to start," Luke said carefully. "I'll help you get the ranch back on its feet. We'll share the profits once there are any to share. I'll teach Thomas about ranching if you're agreeable. And in return, I ask only for a small cabin on the property where I can live instead of the bunkhouse at the Double J. I'm getting too old for shared quarters with men half my age." Willow almost smiled at that. Luke couldn't be much past 30, hardly an old man. And Mr. Jenkins? Won't he object to losing his foreman? I've spoken with him already. He understands. He's even offered to sell you some of his heifers at a fair price to help rebuild your herd. He was fond of Marcus too. It seemed too good to be true, this sudden reprieve from disaster. But the papers before her were real, the debt truly paid. Willow felt something unfurling in her chest, something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. I accept your partnership, Mr. Jameson, she said, extending her hand across the table. And your friendship. Luke's hand engulfed hers, warm and calloused. Good. We'll start tomorrow. True to his word, Luke began working on the Sinclair ranch the very next day. He arrived at dawn, leading a wagon loaded with lumber and tools. By mid-morning, he'd begun repairs on the barn, which had been neglected during Marcus's illness and after his death. Willow watched from the kitchen window as Luke worked, his movements efficient and purposeful. Thomas trailed after him like a shadow, eager to help, and to Willow's surprise, Luke welcomed the boy's assistance, showing him how to hold tools and explaining each step of the repairs. Over the next few weeks, the ranch began to transform. The sagging porch was reinforced, the leaking roof repaired, the broken corral mended. Luke built a small but sturdy cabin for himself on the edge of the property, refusing Willow's offer to stay in the main house until it was finished. Wouldn't be proper, he'd said simply, and Willow had felt a blush creep into her cheeks at the implication. True to his word, Mr. Jenkins sold them a dozen quality heifers at a price that made Willow suspect Luke had supplemented the payment from his own pocket. With care and good management, those cattle would be the foundation of a new herd. By midsummer, the ranch was beginning to prosper again. Willow had kept her jobs in town, determined to contribute to their rebuilding, and the money jar in the kitchen was gradually filling. Luke never asked for any accounting of the funds, seeming content to plow all profits back into the ranch's improvements. One evening in late July, as Willow sat on the porch shelling peas for dinner, Luke approached from his cabin, a bundle under his arm. "Evening, Willow," he said, tipping his hat. They gradually shifted to first names, the formality of their initial arrangement giving way to a comfortable familiarity. "Children asleep, finally," Willow said with a smile. "Thomas wanted to wait up for you to tell you about the calf he helped deliver today." Pride shone in Luke's eyes. "That boy has a real gift. He's going to be a fine rancher someday." "Thanks to you," Willow said softly. "You've given him something I couldn't a man to look up to." Luke looked uncomfortable with the praise. "Just doing what anyone would do." "No," Willow said firmly. "Not what anyone would do. What you did paying off the debt, helping us rebuild, that's extraordinary, Luke. I've never properly thanked you." "No need," Luke said, sitting beside her on the porch step. "Seeing this place come back to life is thanks enough." He placed the bundle beside him. "I brought something for you and the children." Curious, Willow set aside her peas. Luke unwrapped the bundle to reveal 3 books, a collection of fairy tales, an adventure story about the frontier, and a slim volume of poetry. "I was in Denver last week for the cattle auction," Luke explained. "Passed a bookshop and thought of you. You mentioned once that you missed reading." Willow touched the books reverently. New books were a luxury she hadn't enjoyed in years. "Luke, they're beautiful, thank you. The fairy tales are for Emma, the adventure book for Thomas. The poetry," he hesitated, "that one's for you." "I'm not much for fancy words myself, but the shopkeeper said ladies enjoy such things." Willow opened the poetry book, her fingers tracing the elegant typeface. "I do enjoy poetry. My father used to read it aloud to my mother in the evenings." She looked up at Luke, seeing him in a new light. This tough, practical cowboy who could break horses and build barns had thought to bring her poetry. Would you like to hear some? Luke looked uncertain. If you'd like to read it. Willow turned to a random page and began to read, her voice soft in the gathering twilight. The poem was about renewal, about finding hope after sorrow. As she read, she was acutely aware of Luke beside her, his breathing steady, his presence solid and reassuring. When she finished, a comfortable silence fell between them. The night was warm, the air scented with summer grass and distant thunderstorms. "That was nice," Luke said finally. "Reminds me of this place in a way, coming back to life after hard times." "Yes," Willow agreed. "That's exactly what it made me think of too." As the summer progressed into fall, Willow began to notice a change in herself. The crushing weight of grief and worry that had pressed upon her since Marcus's death was gradually lifting. She found herself smiling more, laughing with her children, looking forward to each day rather than dreading it. And she noticed Luke, not just his presence on the ranch, which had become as natural as the sunrise, but the man himself. The way sunlight caught the gold in his hair when he removed his hat to wipe his brow. The gentleness in his hands when he tended a sick calf or taught Emma to ride her pony. The rare but transformative smile that appeared when he was truly pleased about something. These observations troubled her. Marcus had been gone less than a year. Was it disloyal to notice another man? To find herself watching for Luke's arrival each morning, to feel a flutter in her stomach when their hands accidentally touched as they worked side by side. Judging by his behavior, Luke harbored no such feelings for her. He was unfailingly kind, respectful, and helpful, but he maintained a careful distance that sometimes left Willow wondering if he saw her as nothing more than his business partner's widow, a charity case he had taken on out of the goodness of his heart. One crisp October afternoon, Willow rode out to check the northern pasture where their small but growing herd was grazing. As she crested a hill, she spotted Luke by the creek that ran through the property. He was kneeling at the water's edge, shirt removed, washing himself in the cold water. Willow knew she should announce her presence or quietly retreat, but she found herself frozen, unable to look away from the sight of him. His back was a map of hard work and hardship, muscles sculpted by years of physical labor, but also marked with scars that could only have come from war. One particularly vivid scar ran from his left shoulder halfway down his back, a jagged line that made Willow wince in imagined pain. As if sensing her presence, Luke suddenly stilled, then reached for his shirt. "Someone there," he called, not turning around. "It's just me," Willow said, embarrassed to be caught staring. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." Luke pulled his shirt on before standing and turning to face her. "You're not intruding, it's your land." His tone was light, but Willow noticed the flush on his cheeks that wasn't entirely from the cold water. "Our land," she corrected, dismounting from her horse. "At least that's what you keep telling me." Luke's smile was quick but genuine. "So I do." He gestured to the creek. "I was checking the water level. It's holding steady despite the dry spell." "Good news for the cattle," Willow nodded, trying to focus on practical matters rather than the memory of his bare skin in the sunlight. "I was checking on the herd. They look healthy." "They are. We might even show a small profit next spring if prices hold." Luke picked up his hat from the ground and settled it on his head. "Was there something you needed, Willow?" The question was innocent, but Willow felt heat rise to her face. What did she need? Security, yes. Friendship, certainly. But increasingly, she found herself wanting something more from Luke Jameson, something she wasn't sure she had the right to want, or that he would be willing to give. "Just company on the ride back," she said lightly. "It's a beautiful afternoon." Luke studied her for a moment, his blue eyes thoughtful, then nodded. "That it is." As they rode back to the ranch side by side, Willow gathered her courage. "Luke, may I ask you something personal?" "Of course." The scars on your back. Was that from the war?" Luke was silent for so long that Willow thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost distant. "Andersonville. I was a prisoner there for 8 months. The guards were creative with their punishments." Willow had heard of Andersonville, the Confederate prison camp notorious for its brutal conditions. The war had ended 13 years ago, but for those who had lived through its worst horrors, it might as well have been yesterday. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I shouldn't have asked." "It's all right. It was a long time ago." Luke's eyes remained fixed on the horizon. "I was captured at Cold Harbor. By the time they released me after the surrender, I weighed 90 pounds and couldn't walk without help. Took me a year to recover enough to work again." Willow's heart ached for the young man he must have been, suffering such torment. "And your family? You mentioned you lost them in the war." "My parents had a small farm in Virginia. It was in the path of Grant's army during the Wilderness Campaign. They refused to leave." Luke's voice was matter-of-fact, but Willow could hear the old pain beneath the words. "My brother died at Gettysburg the year before. I was the only one left. So you came west." "Not right away. Tried to rebuild the farm, but the land was poisoned shell fragments, graves everywhere. And too many memories." Luke glanced at her. "I drifted for a while, worked my way west, found the Double J 7 years ago and stayed." "Until now," Willow said. "Until now," Luke agreed, and something in his tone made Willow look at him sharply. There was a warmth there that hadn't been present before, a softening around his eyes when they met hers. As they neared the ranch, the sound of children's laughter reached them. Emma and Thomas were in the yard, playing with the new puppy Luke had brought home for them the week before, a lanky, spotted thing of indeterminate breeding but boundless enthusiasm. "They're happy," Luke observed, watching the children. "You've done well by them, Willow." "We've done well by them," Willow corrected him. "You've given them security, a future, and joy." She nodded toward the puppy, which was now rolling in the dust with Emma. "That dog was a stroke of genius. I haven't heard Emma laugh like that since before Marcus died." Luke's smile was tinged with something like wistfulness. "Children need laughter, and dogs. I had both when I was their age. Helps a child grow up right." As they dismounted and led their horses to the barn, Willow found herself wondering what kind of father Luke would be to children of his own. The thought startled her with its intimacy, and she quickly pushed it away. That evening, after the children were asleep, Willow sat at the kitchen table working on the ranch accounts. The numbers were encouraging, not prosperous yet, but stable, with the promise of better days ahead. Luke had taught her the bookkeeping system he'd used at the Double J, and she'd taken to it readily. A knock at the door interrupted her calculations. Luke stood on the porch, holding a lantern. "Sorry to disturb you so late," he said. "I saw the light and thought you might still be up. One of the heifers is calving early and she's having trouble. I could use an extra pair of hands if you're willing." Willow didn't hesitate. "Of course. Let me get my coat." The night was cold, stars brilliant in the clear October sky as they walked to the barn together. Inside, the pregnant heifer was lying on her side in a stall Luke had prepared with fresh straw. Her sides heaved with contractions, but something was clearly wrong. "The calf's turned wrong," Luke explained, rolling up his sleeves. "I need to go in and reposition it or we'll lose them both." For the next hour, they worked together in near silence, communicating with gestures and brief words as Luke struggled to turn the calf while Willow soothed the distressed mother. Their hands met in blood and amniotic fluid, their bodies pressed close in the confined space of the stall. There was an intimacy to the work that transcended ordinary boundaries, life and death hanging in the balance, requiring their complete focus and cooperation. Finally, with a grunt of effort, Luke succeeded in repositioning the calf. "Ready," he said. Next contraction, she should be able to push it out. Sure enough, the heifer's next powerful contraction produced the calf's front hooves, then its head, and with one final push, the entire slick, wet body slid into the straw. For a terrifying moment, the calf lay motionless and Willow felt her heart sink. All that effort and still a loss. Then Luke was moving, clearing the calf's nostrils and mouth, rubbing its chest vigorously. "Come on," he muttered. "Come on, little one." As if in response to his command, the calf shuddered, then took a gasping breath. Luke's face broke into a rare, full smile that transformed his features completely. "There we go." Willow found herself returning his smile, a profound sense of shared accomplishment flowing between them. Together, they helped the wobbly calf find its mother's teat for its first vital feeding, then stepped back to watch the new pair bond. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Luke said softly. "New life. Never gets old seeing that." "No," Willow agreed. "It doesn't." She looked down at her hands and clothes, covered in birth fluids and barn dirt. Though the process could be a bit cleaner. Luke laughed, a rich, warm sound that Willow realized she'd rarely heard from him. Nature's messy. That's what makes it real. He reached out and, to Willow's surprise, gently wiped a smudge from her cheek with his thumb. "Thank you for your help. Not every woman would wade into a difficult calving in the middle of the night." The touch of his hand on her face lingered even after he'd withdrawn it. "I'm not every woman," Willow said, her voice steadier than she felt. "No," Luke agreed, his eyes holding hers in the lantern light. "You're certainly not." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing beneath the surface of their practical partnership. But neither spoke of it as they checked that the heifer and calf were settled, then walked back to the house in companionable silence. At the porch steps, they paused. "Good night, Willow," Luke said, his voice low. "Try to get some sleep." "Good night, Luke, and thank you for everything." As she watched him walk toward his cabin, Willow realized with sudden clarity that she was falling in love with Luke Jameson. The knowledge was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Was she betraying Marcus's memory? Or was this what he would have wanted for her to find happiness again, to have a partner in raising their children and running the ranch he'd loved? She had no answers, only questions that kept her awake long into the night. The next morning dawned clear and cold, frost silvering the grass. Willow was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when a knock came at the door. Expecting Luke, she opened it with a smile that faded when she saw Josiah Blackman standing on her porch. "Mrs. Sinclair," he said, removing his hat. "I hope I'm not calling too early, Mr. Blackman. This is a surprise." Willow didn't invite him in. "What brings you here?" "I was under the impression our business was concluded." Blackman's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That's actually why I've come. There seems to be some irregularity with the loan payment." Alarm shot through Willow. "What kind of irregularity?" "Luke, Mr. Jameson paid the debt in full." "I have the papers." "Yes, well, about Mr. Jameson." Blackman's voice took on a tone of false concern. "Are you aware of his background, Mrs. Sinclair? His reputation?" Willow stiffened. "Mr. Jameson is my business partner and a man of integrity. I trust him completely." A touching sentiment, but perhaps misplaced. Mr. Jameson has a colorful past. There are rumors about his activities during and after the war. Some say he rode with guerrilla bands in Missouri. Others claim he was involved in less than legitimate business ventures before settling at the Double J. "I don't traffic in rumors, Mr. Blackman, and I fail to see what this has to do with my loan." Blackman's smile tightened. "Simply this. The money Mr. Jameson used to pay your debt was withdrawn from the Denver National Bank the day before he paid your loan. A significant sum was stolen from that same bank the previous night." Willow felt as if the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. Are you accusing Luke of being a bank robber? That's absurd. He's worked honestly for the Double J for years. He saved his money. He told me so himself. Did he? And you believed him? A single cowboy with enough cash to pay off a debt of that size? Blackman raised an eyebrow. The authorities in Denver are investigating. I thought you should know, given your close association with Mr. Jameson. Before Willow could respond, she heard the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Luke rode into the yard, pulling up short when he saw Blackman's buggy. "Morning," Luke called, dismounting. His expression was neutral, but Willow saw the wariness in his eyes as he approached the porch. "Everything all right here, Mr. Jameson," Blackman said, his voice oily. "We were just discussing you. Or rather, the interesting coincidence of your sudden wealth and a recent bank robbery in Denver." Luke's face hardened, but he showed no surprise at the accusation. "Is that right, Luke?" Willow said, searching his face. "Tell him it's not true. Tell him where the money really came from." For a long, terrible moment, Luke was silent, his eyes moving from Willow to Blackman and back. Then he sighed. "The money was mine, legally earned. I can prove it." "I'd be very interested to see such proof," Blackman said. "As would the sheriff, I imagine." "I'll be happy to provide it," Luke said evenly. "But not to you." "Willow, may I speak with you privately?" Blackman smirked. "I'll leave you to your discussion, but be careful, Mrs. Sinclair. A woman in your position can't afford to be associated with criminal elements. Think of your children." After Blackman had driven away, Willow turned to Luke, her heart pounding. "Tell me the truth, all of it." Luke's expression was grave. "Let's go inside. This isn't a conversation for the yard." In the kitchen, Luke declined Willow's automatic offer of coffee. "I need you to hear me clearly without distractions," he said. "The money I used to pay your debt was mine, earned legally, but it didn't come from savings from my work at the Double J." "Then where?" Willow asked, bracing herself for the worst. "After the war, before I came west, I had a partner. We started a freight company in St. Louis. It did well, very well. When I decided to leave to start fresh somewhere no one knew me, I sold my share to my partner. The money has been sitting in a bank in Denver all these years. I never needed it until now." Willow studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because it's tied to a part of my life I've tried to leave behind." Luke ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of rare agitation. "The man I was then. I'm not proud of him, Willow. I was angry, bitter about what the war had taken from me. I drank too much, got into fights, made enemies. My partner and I, we weren't always particular about what we transported or for whom." "You were smugglers," Willow said flatly. "Sometimes," Luke admitted. "Nothing that directly hurt anyone, no guns, no opium. Mostly untaxed liquor, foreign goods without import duties. It wasn't honest work, but it wasn't violent crime either." Willow tried to reconcile this confession with the man she knew, steady, reliable, kind to her children. "And the bank robbery Blackman mentioned. A coincidence, or more likely, Blackman trying to cause trouble. He's never forgiven me for paying off your loan. He had other plans for this ranch and for you." The implication made Willow's skin crawl. "Can you prove the money was yours legally?" "Yes. I have the bank drafts, the bill of sale for my share of the company, everything in order. I'll ride to town today and speak with the sheriff." Willow nodded slowly. "Why now, Luke? Why use that money now after all these years?" Luke met her eyes directly. "Because you needed it." "Because I couldn't stand by and watch you and the children lose everything." "But why?" Willow pressed. "We were practically strangers when you paid my debt. Why would you do that for people you barely knew?" Luke was silent for a long moment. Then, his voice low, he said, "I knew Marcus better than I let on. We served together briefly before I was captured. He saved my life during a skirmish outside Richmond. Took a bullet that was meant for me." Willow gasped softly. "He never told me. He wouldn't have." It wasn't his way to boast about such things, but I never forgot. When I came west and found him here in Red River, it seemed like fate. We didn't speak of the war, neither of us wanted those memories, but there was a bond. "So you paid his debt out of gratitude?" Willow asked, trying to understand. "Partly," Luke admitted, "but also because." He hesitated, then continued more firmly. "Because from the moment I met you, I admired your strength. The way you held yourself together for your children's sake, even when you were drowning in grief and worry. I wanted to help, yes, but more than that, I wanted to know you, to be part of your life if you'd allow it." The honesty in his words struck Willow like a physical force. "Luke, I understand if this changes things," he said quickly. "If you want me to go, I will. The ranch is yours. The debt is paid. You don't owe me anything." "Go," Willow repeated, the word catching in her throat. "Is that what you want?" "No," Luke said simply. "It's the last thing I want, but I've not been entirely honest with you and you deserve better." Willow considered his confession, weighing it against everything she knew of him: his gentleness with her children, his tireless work on the ranch, the way he'd never asked for anything in return for his help. Whatever his past mistakes, the man standing before her now was someone she trusted, someone who had become essential to her life in ways that went far beyond practical considerations. "I don't want you to go," she said finally, "but I need to know that everything you've told me now is the truth. No more secrets, Luke. If we're to be partners in whatever sense, there can be no more hidden pasts." "No more secrets," Luke agreed, relief evident in his voice. "I swear it, Willow." Later that day, Luke rode to town with his documentation, returning by evening with confirmation from the sheriff that the money had indeed been his legally. Blackman's insinuations were revealed as the desperate attempts of a thwarted man to cause trouble. As autumn deepened into winter, the ranch settled into a routine. The small herd was thriving, the buildings were sound against the coming cold, and the pantry was stocked with provisions. Willow continued her work in town, saving every penny toward future improvements. Luke, true to his word, kept no more secrets from her. He spoke of his past when she asked, though never dwelling on the war's horrors. In turn, Willow shared stories of her childhood in Pennsylvania, her parents' initial disappointment when she chose to marry a rancher, her dreams for her children's future. They worked side by side during the days, and increasingly spent evenings together as well. Luke would join them for supper, then read to the children before their bedtime. Afterward, he and Willow would sit by the fire, talking or simply enjoying the quiet companionship that had grown between them. One snowy December evening, as they sat in the warm kitchen after the children were asleep, Luke asked, "Do you ever regret it, marrying Marcus, coming west?" Willow considered the question seriously. "No," she said finally. "It hasn't been an easy life, but it's been a real one. I've known true love, the joy of children, the satisfaction of building something with my own hands, even the grief." She paused. "Even the grief has its purpose, I think. It teaches us what matters." Luke nodded, his eyes on the fire. "And what matters to you now, Willow?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Willow looked at this man who had saved her home, who had become her partner, her friend, and increasingly something more. "Family," she said softly. "The ranch, a future for my children." She gathered her courage. "And you, Luke? You matter to me now." Luke's eyes, when they met hers, were filled with an emotion she hadn't allowed herself to name until that moment. "You matter to me too, Willow, more than I can say." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. The touch was gentle but sure, like the man himself. "I know it hasn't been a year since Marcus passed. I know your heart is still healing. I don't want to rush you or dishonor his memory." "Marcus would want me to be happy," Willow said, certainty filling her voice. "He would want the children to have a father who loves them, and I think he would approve of you, Luke. You were his friend, after all." Luke squeezed her hand. "I'd like to court you properly, Willow, if you're ready. If not, I'll wait." Willow turned her hand in his, their fingers intertwining. "I'm ready," she said. "I've been ready for some time now." As winter gave way to spring, Luke's courtship was conducted with the same quiet integrity that marked everything he did. He brought Willow small gifts, wildflowers as soon as they appeared, a hair ribbon from the general store, a book of poetry to add to her growing collection. He took her for rides across the ranch on Sunday afternoons, the children sometimes accompanying them, sometimes staying with Mrs. Henderson, who had become a friend. The ranch prospered under their joint care. The spring calving was successful, with only 2 losses out of 20 births. The vegetable garden Willow planted yielded abundantly. Luke built a proper chicken coop to replace the ramshackle one, and egg production increased accordingly. By summer, it was clear to everyone in Red River that Luke Jameson and Willow Sinclair were more than business partners. Gossip flowed, of course, some kind, some spiteful, but Willow found she cared less than she would have expected. The opinions of others mattered far less than the happiness she found in Luke's company, in the life they were building together. One warm evening in July, exactly a year after Luke had paid her debt, he asked Willow to walk with him to the creek where they had spoken of his war experiences months before. The spot had become special to them, a place of honesty, of deepening connection. As they stood by the water's edge, the setting sun painting the landscape in gold and crimson, Luke took both her hands in his. "Willow," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion she could see in his eyes, "this past year has been the happiest of my life. Working alongside you, watching you with your children, seeing your strength and your kindness every day, it's been a gift I never expected." Willow felt tears gathering, but they were tears of joy rather than the sorrow that had been her constant companion for so long. "For me as well, Luke. You've brought happiness back into our lives when I thought it was gone forever. When I came to Red River, I was just existing, going through the motions of living without really being alive. Then I met you and everything changed." Luke's hands tightened on hers. "I love you, Willow. I love Thomas and Emma as if they were my own. I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you'll have me." Willow's heart felt too full for her chest. "Are you asking me to marry you, Luke Jameson?" A smile, one of those rare, transformative smiles that still made her breath catch, spread across his face. "I am. Will you be my wife, Willow? Let me be a father to your children, a partner in all things." "Yes," Willow said, the word emerging as a joyful affirmation. "Yes, I will marry you." Luke released her hands only to cup her face gently, his calloused palms warm against her skin. Then, with the same deliberate care he brought to everything, he kissed her. It was their first kiss, but it held the promise of a lifetime of such moments, tender, passionate, honest. When they returned to the house, hand in hand, they found Thomas and Emma waiting anxiously on the porch. "Did you ask her?" Thomas demanded, bouncing on his toes. "Did you ask Mama to marry you?" Luke laughed. "I did, young man, and she said yes." Emma let out a squeal of delight and launched herself at Luke, who caught her easily. "Does that mean you'll be our papa now? For real?" Luke's eyes met Willow's over Emma's dark curls. "If that's all right with you, yes, I'd be honored to be your papa." Thomas, trying to maintain the dignity of his 7 years, offered Luke his hand to shake. "We've been needing a papa," he said seriously, "and you're a good one." Willow watched the scene through happy tears, marveling at how far they had come from the desperate widow and her fatherless children, facing ruin and despair. Luke had not only paid the debt that threatened their home, he had healed the deeper wounds of loss and uncertainty, bringing strength and joy back into their lives. They were married in August, a simple ceremony in the church in Red River. Mr. Jenkins stood as Luke's best man, and Mrs. Henderson as Willow's matron of honor. The children, scrubbed and solemn in their best clothes, stood beside them as they spoke their vows. Afterward, there was a celebration at the ranch, with neighbors and friends gathering to share food and music and good wishes. Even Josiah Blackman came, chastened by his failed attempt to discredit Luke and eager to maintain good relations with what was becoming one of the more promising ranches in the area. As the sun set on their wedding day, Willow and Luke stood on the porch of the home they now truly shared, watching their guests depart. "Happy?" Luke asked, his arm around her waist. "Completely," Willow said, leaning into his embrace. "And you? More than I ever thought possible." Luke pressed a kiss to her temple. "I spent so many years just surviving, Willow. With you, I'm finally living." As the seasons turned, the Jameson Ranch, as it was now known, continued to prosper. Luke's knowledge of cattle breeding and Willow's careful management of their finances proved a winning combination. They expanded cautiously, adding land when it became available, increasing their herd gradually to ensure quality. Thomas, now 8, was Luke's shadow, absorbing everything he could about ranching. Emma at 6 was equally determined to help, particularly with the horses that Luke bred as a sideline to their cattle operation. The following spring brought a new blessing. Willow discovered she was expecting a child. Luke received the news with a joy that moved her deeply, gathering her in his arms with reverent care. "A baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "Our baby." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and in November of 1880, Willow gave birth to a son they named William Luke Jameson. Unlike the debt and despair that had marked the beginning of their relationship, this new beginning was one of joy and promise. As Luke held his newborn son, his face reflected the same transformation Willow had witnessed when he'd saved that struggling calf, a profound connection to the miracle of life, a determination to protect and nurture this new being. "He's perfect," Luke whispered, carefully placing the baby in Willow's arms, "just like his mother." Willow smiled up at her husband, exhausted but radiant, and his father. She glanced toward the doorway, where Thomas and Emma waited anxiously for their first glimpse of their new brother. "Come in, you two. Come meet William." The children approached the bed cautiously, eyes wide with wonder at the tiny, red-faced bundle in their mother's arms. "He's so small," Thomas said, peering at his half-brother. "You were that small once," Luke told him, ruffling the boy's hair. "Hard to believe, isn't it?" Emma, ever direct, asked. "Does this mean you'll love him more than us? Because he's really yours." Luke knelt to look her in the eye. "Emma, listen to me carefully. You and Thomas are mine in every way that matters. I couldn't love you more if I'd been there the day you were born. This little fellow doesn't change that one bit." The sincerity in his voice convinced her, and she nodded solemnly. "Good, because I love you too, Papa." As Willow watched her family, her complete, healed family, gather around the newest member, she thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the depths of grief and financial ruin to this abundance of love and security, it had been a path she could never have imagined. Luke caught her eye over the children's heads, and the look they shared held all the words they didn't need to speak aloud. Whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together, with the strength they had found in each other and the love that had transformed them both. Years passed, and the Jameson Ranch became one of the most respected in Colorado. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, market fluctuations, and the changing landscape of the West as the frontier gradually gave way to settlement and civilization. Through it all, Luke and Willow's partnership remained the solid foundation on which their success was built. Thomas grew into a fine young man with his stepfather's quiet competence and his mother's determination. By the time he was 18, he was effectively co-managing the ranch alongside Luke. Emma, at 16, had developed a reputation as one of the finest horsewomen in the territory, with a special talent for gentling difficult mounts. Young William, now 10, showed signs of combining the best qualities of both his parents, with Luke's patience and Willow's quick intelligence. 2 more children had joined the family over the years. Sarah, born in 1883, and James, in 1886. The large, bustling household was a far cry from the quiet desperation Willow had known after Marcus's death. One evening, as Willow and Luke sat on the porch watching the sunset, a habit they had maintained throughout their marriage, Luke took her hand, his thumb tracing the wedding ring he had placed there years before. "You remember that day by the creek, when I told you about Andersonville?" he asked. "Of course," Willow said, squeezing his hand. "It was the first time you really opened up to me." "I was so afraid then," Luke admitted. "Afraid you'd see the broken parts of me and turn away. Afraid I wasn't worthy of the happiness I found with you and the children." Willow turned to face him, her hand rising to touch his cheek, now bearing the lines of a man in his 40s who had lived a full life. "We were both broken in our ways, Luke, but we healed each other. That's what love does, it makes us whole again." Luke nodded, his eyes reflecting the sunset's glow. "When I paid that debt, I had no idea what I was really buying. I thought I was just securing a home for a widow and her children, honoring an old debt to a fellow soldier. I never imagined I was finding my own salvation. And I never imagined that the darkest moment of my life, facing the loss of everything Marcus and I had built, would lead me to the greatest happiness I've ever known," Willow replied. "Life has strange ways of bringing us where we need to be." From inside the house came the sound of their children's voices, Thomas explaining something to William, Emma's laughter, little James's endless questions, Sarah's sweet singing. The sounds of family, of home, of love that had grown from the ashes of despair. "I wouldn't change a thing," Luke said softly. "Not a single step that brought us here." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Colorado sky in shades of purple and gold, Willow leaned her head on her husband's shoulder, secure in the knowledge that what they had built together would endure a legacy of love and resilience for their children and the generations that would follow. The debt had been paid in full, but the healing it had brought was a gift beyond measure, one that would continue to bear fruit long after the hardships that had brought them together were nothing more than distant memories, transformed by time and love into the foundation of a life richly lived.